Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'll just give everyone a chance to get settled in and then we'll get started. Okay, well, as people continue to kind of jump in here, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. My name is Crystal Shaughnessy. I am the event specialist here at EDB, and I'll be your host today for our webinar. I am joined by Matt Lewandowski. Matt is a senior product manager at EDB and will be presenting our webinar today on Oracle Migration Made Easy. So thank you so much for everyone who's joining. Before we get started, I'll review just a couple of housekeeping items quickly. Firstly, the presentation is being recorded and we will be sharing both the recording and the slides with you at the close of the broadcast. So please keep an eye out for that email. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to our team. Secondly, the lines are currently muted. We do expect the presentation to last most of our time today. We have a lot of great content to cover. So we will be taking questions kind of throughout if there's time. And of course, at the end, if you do have questions, please make sure you get those into the Q&A panel. I will do my very best to monitor the chat for any questions that are floating around. But of course, a priority will be given to questions that are in the Q&A panel. And that being said, if there are any outstanding questions at the end of the webinar and we sort of run out of time, we will be following up with attendees to ensure we get some answers to you guys. So with that, I'll hand it off to Matt to kick us off.
All right, well, thank you, Crystal. So before we get into things, we want to introduce a few poll questions. We feel like these are sort of good things to inform us of what your concerns are, but also to also stress some of the things that we might talk about here. So first poll question is going to be, if you are considering a migration off of Oracle or another database, what do you see as the biggest motivator behind the migration? Is it cost, business practices, deployment flexibility, application modernization, technology consolidation, or something else? If you just take some time to answer those, that would be great. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about myself as you're answering those questions. My name is Matt Lewandowski, as Crystal said. I've been at EDB for about 7 years now. I am the senior product manager of our migration capabilities. Prior to filling this role, I've also worked in as a solutions engineer in our sales teams, as well as part of our CTO office. Prior to coming to EDB, I've had 20 plus years of experience, mostly working under public sector contracts for different companies and bringing other software products to market and having those be implemented out in the field by our customers. So I helped them with that sort of thing. A large part of those applications were actually Oracle applications. So I have my experience from that. Coming to EDB, I have my experience with EDB. And hopefully, we in the product management team are giving you the Postgres capabilities that you need. And my specific roles about migrations and helping customers be able to do migrations off of Oracle to Postgres. So if we can close out that poll question, get some results on that, and then we'll move on. So great. So yeah, not unexpectedly, we're seeing that the cost is by far the biggest driver. And some of the other ones are a little bit smaller, but application modernization, we're seeing about 15% of that. So that's sort of what I would have expected. So that's great to hear. So let's just talk about that first of all. As we go through this presentation, my goals are to just discuss a little bit of why folks migrate off of Oracle to Postgres, and specifically with EDB. That first question that we asked there was really geared towards that. The second poll question will also give us a little bit more information around all that as well. And that's now in front of you, if you could answer those as well. What do you see as the biggest challenges to migrating off of Oracle to other databases from to Postgres, and we'll get to the answer to that in just a bit. Some other factors for considering when migrating is something else I want to cover. I also want to talk about how EDB can help make migrations easier. And then once you've done that migration, we can talk about how EDB supports your Postgres applications. So first of all, let's talk about leaving Oracle. Having a little bit of technical difficulties. There we go. Now, why leave EDB? Why leave Postgres? Man, really fumbling here. So why leave Oracle? First and foremost, as you guys have indicated in your poll questions, it's price, and is the biggest reason. But there are other reasons. Business practices is often what we hear from our customers, is that they're just tired of the audits, and they're tired of always trying to find ways to make them pay for more licenses and stuff like that. So I think the business practices is probably closely tied to the cost of Oracle. Deployment flexibility, as we look to the cloud and more modern deployment environments like containers, Postgres and databases like that are much easier to deploy, plus also tied in with business practices and licensing that also relates to deployment flexibility as well, is that you want to be able to move your databases to the environments that you need them, and you need that flexibility without worrying about, is this going to be a increase in your license cost? And then agility innovation, which sort of ties to that application modernization. You want to have a database that's going to support your initiatives in that area. And then just consolidation. It's easy to have a proliferation of different database technologies, and that comes with cost, both from a skills perspective, plus maintaining all sorts of different licenses. So oftentimes, that is a motivation for leaving Oracle, because maybe you have some other databases that you're preferring to use instead. If we could wrap up the previous poll question, Crystal, that'd be great. And so why wouldn't you just move from Oracle if it's you have those motivators? Well, there are some obstacles. First and foremost, migrations can be hard. Both technically, sometimes you have challenges, but also just from the perspective of the impacts to the business. You have also folks that they're used to using that. They're afraid also of losing capability. So it's difficult, not only from the challenges of the actual work you need to do the migration, but also for getting people on board with doing it. You have built up probably Oracle skills. You've invested in that, and you're afraid of losing that. You're also afraid of, well, do I have the skills I needed that I would need to move to a different database? Oracle, as we said, their business practices have maybe left you with some troublesome contracts that may be difficult to get out of. And also you may have applications that are just simply designed for Oracle or only supported on Oracle. So let's, looking at the poll results, the biggest item there was the complexity and level of effort of database migration. And that's not surprising either. So that's, I think all the other things are things that you think that you can get through pretty easily. And then application refactoring is a close, second to the complexity of the overall effort. So we hope to talk about those as we go through this presentation here today. So we're here to talk today about moving to Postgres from Oracle. And why would you do that? Well, the world is adopting Postgres. It is a very capable database. Stack Overflow, DB Engines, and others. If you look at the results of their surveys, you'll see that Postgres is the fastest growing database management system. It has a large developer community that loves it. It's becoming a standard for organizations across the board. In fact, organizations are not only using it for migrations, they're also using it to build new applications. And we are really just seeing a race to use more and more Postgres for their applications. And it can be, as we saw earlier in our poll results, that cost is a big concern. Well, Postgres is an economic game changer when it comes to that. software spend in the IT organizations, we see that databases are the #1 software spend there. Every dollar that you save on your database licensing frees up money for other things. And so bottom line, this does improve your bottom line and your budget capability, which really enables you to be more innovative and apply your money and limited budget to other activities. That's all well and good, cost and being able to save money, but you wouldn't want to do that unless you felt confident in moving to Postgres. Postgres itself supports a wide range of applications and use cases. It can be used for system engagements and systems of record type application, reporting applications. It supports all modern data types and most of them directly within the database itself, not just relational content. It has an unbeatable tech foundation. The Postgres community prides itself on building stable releases and focusing on performance and security. So, and also on top of that, it's built on the same technical white papers and concepts that were used to build Oracle and DB2 and SQL Server and databases like that. It's also been around for over 25 years. So it's not like a new kid on the block. The community itself has spent a lot of time making it very stable and very useful software and ready for enterprise use, more or less. And then also it's just a large talent pool of a community that I think is a real success story when it comes to open source. No one vendor dominates the community from a decision-making perspective. It's been set up so that it's more or less preventative of doing it. And you do have a team of individuals from across the world, different companies, who are able to pull together and build good software and have a good spirit of cooperation amongst themselves. All this, leads to more freedom for you because you have a database that you can count on, and it continues to evolve and get better. And where does EDB fit in all this? Well, EDB, we have 75% of the Fortune 500 organizations out there are EDB customers. EDB itself contributes to 30% or more of the Postgres code base. We have 1,400 plus global customers, more than 300 of dedicated Postgres engineers on staff, and 3 of the 7 core members of the Postgres community are EDB employees. So we are a heartbeat of Postgres. There are other companies who do contribute to it, and we don't. We would be remiss in acknowledging that, but we are certainly a big part of it. And even though we can't control what the Postgres community does, we can influence it through having the staff that we do. What we do at EDB is that we provide you enterprise-grade versions of Postgres as well as support the community version, and we give you the tools to help you use Postgres in your enterprises. We have tools to help with extreme high availability and running Postgres at scale. Also, we pay attention to security and are introducing features for that. And then today's focus is about migration. So we are helping customers with automating migration processes. As I mentioned before, flexible deployment is often a consideration, and we have to provide you the capabilities to deploy your Postgres anywhere in multiple cloud environments, on-premise hybrid environments, in the containers, virtual machines, just about any kind of environment where you might need to deploy your database. We can support you in that area. And then we have the 15 plus years of experience in working with Postgres and also in migrations. So we can help you accelerate your Postgres deployment and help you keep it running well. From a migration perspective, we provide 24/7 support for Postgres, as I said, at deployment and at any scale. We provide a comprehensive set of migration tools and services. And then sort of the centerpiece of our offering is that we have a version of Postgres with deep compatibility for Oracle database. All these 3 items here really help reduce costs and mitigate your risk when it comes to performing migrations off of Oracle. So with that, that's sort of an overview of EDB, but like, how do we specifically help you with migrations? Well, first and foremost, before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about some of the factors to consider when migrating off of a database, and Oracle in particular, is that there's 4 main items that you need to think about. You have your schemas, that's your tables and your indexes and your views and the database code itself. In Oracle, that code is going to be written in what we call PL SQL language. Some databases will make more heavy use of that than others. So, those are things you need to worry about. You also need to worry about the mapping of your data types in Oracle. And there may be syntaxes between how Oracle handles something and how Postgres handles something. So things that you need to think about when migrating your schemas. Then you actually have the data that exists in those structures in your database that you need to move. And you need to think about whether you can do that move in one shot, or whether you need to do it in a more of a ongoing basis, and also whether you need to have a fallback position established, so that if you need to, as part of the migration, if you run into some troubles and need to get back to operating in the Oracle for a little bit, you have a way of doing that. And then with that migration, you'll need a good set of tools to help with extraction and transformation of loading, and as well as validation of your data that it's moved over just fine. From an infrastructure perspective, big consideration is, where are you today? What environment are you running on? Are you running in the cloud? Are you running on premise? And where do you want to go to? So maybe you want to go to the cloud, maybe you're running on premise today. And you need to think about the differences between those environments. And then also, over time, you've built up optimizations of your systems, not only of your database, but also your systems as well. You need to think about what that infrastructure in the target environment is going to look like, and some of the same optimizations you might need to do there. And obviously, things like high availability and security and things of that nature are things that you're going to have to think about for your target environments as well. And then finally, the databases are really there to support applications. So you also need to think about the aspects of moving your application, the code, the SQL that exists in that code, what language those applications are built in, what are your connectors to your database, and then you may also need to think about performance and optimization of the application itself. So if you look at those factors, you see that we asked a survey a couple of years ago now to our customers, what are the things that they see as the biggest obstacles. And the wedges are different sizes. In this particular survey, about 38% of the folks said that migrating the data was their biggest obstacle. But by and large, you see pretty big wedges for all 4 of the main categories that we talked about previously, with cost being a small wedge there as well. But just rest assured that EDB has the capabilities to help you address all these areas here. As we think about migrations, we took a step back recently, and we wanted to articulate what are the steps involved. We think it's important for our customers to understand that when you do a migration. We'll simplify this view in a few slides later, but let's just step through what are the actual steps in moving a database application. Well, first of all, you have to decide to do that. And that decision is often driven by a business case, some of the things that we've talked about earlier being motivators for that. But it also needs to have organizational alignment. You can maybe want to do it, but if you don't have the budget or the staff to get it done, then you're not going to be successful in doing it. So very important that you decide to migrate and also sort of commit to doing that migration. Next, once you've decided that, you need to look at your systems and analyze them for feasibility of being migrated, as well as look what the different target alternatives are. Our hope is that most of this could move to Postgres, obviously, but that's not always the case. Sometimes things need to stay on Oracle. Sometimes there's some other database that might be more appropriate for some sets of your applications. Important at this stage to review your application portfolio and make sure that what the strategy you've chosen aligns with your IT strategy. Also consider that some of your applications may not be good candidates. Maybe you want to just sunset them. They're no longer needed, or maybe you want to choose a different application altogether. Of the ones that remain, though, you decide how and when you're going to move them, and then you need to decide where you're going to move to, in the cloud, on premise, and you have what are your choices available for your Postgres database. Once you've done that high level of feasibility analysis, then you can begin planning. And this is where you prioritize your applications that you want to move, which ones are going to be the most important to move. What are the maybe it's not the highest risk application first. Maybe you choose something that will be of value to the organization, but give you enough confidence if you are successful with it that you can proceed with other ones. This is where you start to plan for that sort of thing. You also will define non-functional requirements and make sure that you are preparing your system so that you can actually perform this migration. And this is also where you would do level of effort estimates, and you just basically plan the work for getting the migrations done. And then once you've done that, you can actually undertake migrating the database. So this next step sort of encapsulates all the database migration parts: moving the schema, moving the database code functionality, and moving the data. And as we mentioned earlier, that you might move the data in one fell swoop via a snapshot, or you may choose to use a change data capture process for that. So those are, that's where a bulk of your work's going to be when it comes to moving the database. After you move the database, you need to think about moving your application interfaces. You need to have connectors that are going to allow you to connect to the Postgres database. You may need to convert your embedded application SQLs. Much of the SQL may work as is. Some of it may need to be updated. And then, depending on what your strategy is, you may also be moving your application from its current environment to another environment as well. Beyond the applications themselves, you often will have database utilities and other sorts of reports that are part of the bigger, ecosystem of that application. And you'll most likely need to migrate those as well. So oftentimes those are built with Oracle in mind. So maybe the processes need to be changed around all that, but also just the scripting language and things beyond that will often need to be considered as well. And then finally, although you've probably been doing testing along the way, you want to have a more formal sets of tests around validating your data and validating the functionality of both the database as well as the application, and then performance validation. This is important to understand whether the migrated system is close to being ready to be deployed in a way that you would feel is operational. Once you get to the point where your tests are good, you kind of round out the rest of the work of moving the application by optimizing and configuring your post-migration system. This is where you'll do the last bits of database tuning, the query tuning, the application tuning, so that it runs as best as it can. You'll also finish addressing your high availability and disaster recovery needs, and you make sure that your security settings are in place as well. And then finally, at that point, you're ready to start using the new application environment. Oftentimes we'll set up a rollback configuration, as I said, where we'll be replicating or migrating data back to the Oracle database. So we have that as a fallback position if we encounter some issues. But when we feel like we're ready that the application is running well in the new production environment, then we can have that go, no-go decision. If we decide to go forward, then we can complete the cutover, and then we can also remove that fallback position. So those are the steps that are really involved in the migration, and it may seem complicated, but this is where having the good set of tools and having experts that can help you along the way will help out. Also, as you get comfortable with doing migrations yourself and being part of that process, this will become sort of second nature. These are the things we just need to do as part of our migration. One of the key components that EDB leverages is for migration is that we have a version of Postgres that has compatibility with Oracle built into it. And this helps with a lot of the phases of that journey. We'll, as we talked about the things that you need to move, you have the schema, the data, the code, you have the actual applications. There's also the operational tools, how you do backups and how you monitor and manage your database. You need to have tools in place for all those sorts of things. EDB helps with all of this. Some vendors can help you with part of the way. They can help you with schema and data. Some can help you with maybe the code as well. Others might provide a little bit of assistance on the interface. EDB captures all 5 of these aspects, and we have tools and services to help you with all of those. As we mentioned, compatibility is sort of a big feature for us. With EDB's Postgres Advanced Server, you get compatibility that's both wide and deep. In the areas of compatibility, I think the highlight there is the third bullet there is that we have Sql support built in to Advanced Server. And if you have applications or databases that make heavy use of Sql, this can be a major stumbling block for moving applications. With Sql in Advanced Server, we can just simply run a lot of your existing database code as is. We also offer data like Oracle-like data dictionary views. So DBAs that are familiar with the all views and DBA views, user views, those are things that we provide, many of those within Advanced Server itself, as well as utility packages that Oracle builds. We have versions of those built into our system as well. And then we just understand Oracle data types and many syntax of Oracle conventions that we just have built right into Advanced Server database. All this, the benefits of compatibility really comes down to that it can significantly reduce the amount of time that's required, as well as effort required to migrate from Oracle. And also our tools ease the transition of your users who are used to using Oracle tools like SQL Plus and SQL Developer. And then just the syntax, they can continue using that same syntax in many cases. So that eases the transition for them as well. Just to, I guess, emphasize compatibility just a bit more, we have one of the tools that I'll talk about a little bit more later, that is Migration Portal. And we did some queries of that last year. And here's some of the results of that. You can see that many of the schemas that we were processing were including Oracle supply packages, over 32% of those. But those are just covered out of the box through Advanced Server. There's also other Oracle constructs like Pragma Autonomous Transaction. Over 14% of the schemas had that in it. There's no easy way to do that, just core Postgres by itself. Advanced Server does offer a solution for that. Also, queries may have hints in it. Again, Postgres doesn't really support that very well. Advanced Server does support hints. So those are all things that we saw that customers had in their schemas that they didn't have to worry about because they were able to move those to Postgres Advanced Server, and it just handled them for them. And then finally, again, just the benefits of compatibility. It helps your business because it allows you to lower your costs and reduce risk of migrating. It also helps your people and that you're able to leverage your existing skills. And it also helps your application because you can leverage existing infrastructure. And much of your existing SQL can work as is, as well as OCI code, if you have any of that, is able to operate more or less with very little change. So at that point, we're going to take a pause for review some questions, but also we want to introduce poll question C here at this point. If you are considering a migration, what is the expected target environment? On-premise, Kubernetes, self-managed database, and managed database service. We'll leave that up for just a few minutes. And Crystal, do we have any questions that I could answer at this point?
We do, yeah. Let's maybe start with how do we speed up the migration process and reduce the temp usage in Oracle?
I'm sorry, the temp usage?
I think are they meaning the temporary usage in Oracle if they're migrating over?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, it says, how do we speed up the migration process and reduce the temp usage in Oracle?
Okay.
I don't have, oh, sorry. I was just saying, I don't have a name on that. So
okay.
it came in as anonymous. If that's your question, you want to send us some clarifying.
That's well, let me just try to address it. So, I think, we have certainly on the database side of things, our compatibility layer makes it easier to migrate your database code. If you have any PL SQL triggers, procedures, functions, a lot of that will just move over and just work within Advanced Server. Also, you have the factor on data migration. We have the tools to either allow you to do snapshots, and we have some options to be able to move data in parallel so that you can move that data quicker. If you have a need where you need to maintain your database temporarily, the source database, while you're vetting out the whole migration, you can do a change data capture process, and we have tools to help with all of that. And then there's the other aspects of it where we have the moving the code itself. Since we understand Oracle syntax and our drivers or connectors to the database can also understand some Oracle specific conventions in their drivers, that makes that job also easier to move. So in the end, every migration is different. And so you have to sort of look at what are the things that you would need to focus on those migrations. And chances are we have some features and capabilities to help you with that. All right, why don't we close out the poll question and move on, because there's still a bit of content to go to, and we'll come back to questions and answers in a bit. Okay, so I find this interesting. So, everybody talks about the cloud these days as if that's just like where everybody's going. But last few times I've asked this question, and no different today, the predominant number of folks say that they're continuing to migrate on premises to either virtual or physical machines. And that's true here today. And actually, cloud, if you could do the combined self-managed and as well as managed service, it's probably a close second if you look at it combined. So again, EDB helps with there. And the Kubernetes containers, again, about 10% of you said that. And that's kind of, I think, reasonable given what I've sort of the landscape that I see out there from that. So, and interesting that, on-premises deployments aren't going away from what I can tell. All right, let's move on. So, the point of that question is sort of just figure out where people are going with their migrations. And as we said, on-premise is still something that you're considering there. We do have the ability to migrate and use Postgres in physical servers or VMs in your on-premise environments, in private clouds in your on-premise environments, or in Kubernetes or containers. In general, we just have a Kubernetes operator that's built in a cloud-native way, and just about any Kubernetes, standard Kubernetes environment, we should be able to deploy. And we do certify with a set of those with our operator. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely check out our cloud-native Postgres capabilities in that area. And then, from the cloud perspective, we have the ability for you to manage in your databases in an infrastructure as a service kind of environment where you deploy it on your own, so let's say in Amazon EC2 instances, or you can use our Big Animal service, which is a managed service that has both a PostgreSQL offering as well as an advanced server offering. So if you have that Oracle compatibility need, you can run an Oracle compatible version of Postgres as a managed service through our Big Animal offering. And that's available both Azure and Amazon today. Google will be coming in the near future as well. Just want to focus on the Big Animal just a little bit. Again, as I mentioned, Oracle compatibility option is available there if you're interested in having a managed service offering as a target of your Oracle migration. Big Animal is available for that. So if we harken back to the migration journey, if we just sort of boil that down into three main steps, I think about it as assessment is one of those steps. The actual database migration is another step. And then you have the application migration. In the assessment, that's where we do the analysis of your feasibility. That's also where you're doing the planning and sort of commit to doing the migration. And when you do a database migration, that's where you're going to be actually migrating the database schema and the data and the code that's in that database. And then you have the application, and that's all the other pieces, the actual application code, as well as the the reports. That's where you set up your environment and finish making sure that it's something that can run well in your new environment. And then sort of like underlying all this is being able to bring folks in to help with performing the migration. So we provide tools in the top three layers there, and then we have professional services that can help you with your migrations as well. A big picture, like these are the, I guess, the flagship tools that most folks will use in their migrations. The migration portal, that's a free web-based tool that you can use to assess your Oracle schemas and also allow you to convert that schema. If there's any incompatibilities, you can fix it within migration portal and then target move it to your target database. Migration Toolkit, where it has a lot of capabilities, primarily for Oracle migrations, we see that being used to perform snapshot replication. It is a command line tool and allows you to move your data. And it has some options that can help speed up migrations, like for parallel movement of data and stuff like that. And then Replication Server is a tool that, it's built for replication, but it's important for migrations because it supports heterogeneous migrations from Oracle to Postgres and Postgres to Oracle. So it can be used for change data capture type of migrations, and also to support a fallback position from Postgres back to Oracle if you need that. And then again, if you have a complex migration or if you have short staff to do the migrations, our migration services can actually be used to help you with that as well. So come back to this journey again. I just want to point out that these are the steps there. If we look at that journey, what are the tools and services we offer there? I'll just, before I get into it, each one of those steps, services can be brought to bear. So I'm not going to focus too much on those. There are different services at different points along the way that can be used, but they'll be sort of underlying in all these. But whenever in the feasibility phase, that's where you would use the migration portal as a tool. When you go to plan, this is primarily just an exercise that's going to be done with people. You'll take the results of your migration portal, and then you will just engage with services to sort of plan out the rest of the activity. When you're ready to move the data and the schema and the database code itself, we have the migration portal to help with the schema and the database code, migration toolkit or replication server to help with the movement of data. There are some options if you have sort of more complex type of data movements that could leverage database links and foreign data wrappers to actually pull data from Oracle. And then underlying all that is advanced server with its Oracle compatibility makes it easier to move those components to Postgres. From moving your application and interfaces, again, since you are targeting an advanced server database and its Oracle compatibility features, much of your application will just work because it'll be using constructs that'll be familiar to that application. But also our connectors themselves have some level of compatibility built into them. And the four main connectors we offer are JDBC, ODBC, an OCI connector, as well as .NET. There is a Pro-C interface as well. So those also make moving your applications easier as well. For migrating your reports and management tools, two of the most important tools that a lot of Oracle users will use is SQL Plus and SQL Loader. SQL Plus is a tool that runs SQL scripts. Also, it's an interface where you can query the database and do updates and inserts of your data through the command line. EDB offers a tool called EDB Plus that is a SQL Plus workalike. It understands SQL Plus syntax. It can run SQL Plus scripts, many of those without without needing to be edited that much. And then EDB Loader is a tool like SQL Loader for bulk loading of data. So if you have sort of processes built around SQL Loader, EDB Loader can be used for that as well. And finally, I should say finally, the next step is, after you've moved data and you've moved your system over, you need to engage in some testing. Live Compare is a tool that can be used to validate your data between the source and target systems. Tools like Postgres Enterprise Manager, which is built on pgadmin, which is a popular open source tool, that it can be used to monitor your database and analyze queries and just look at the performance of your system. So oftentimes you're going to be using Postgres Enterprise Manager as part of your testing activity. And then when you're optimizing, configuring your environment, and that's where, again, PAM will be important for that. But we also have tools to support backup recovery, barman, high availability, either through Failover Manager or through our Postgres Distributed, which was formerly called BDR. Those are tools that oftentimes are going to be configured in your environment because that's what you need for your operations. And then finally, when you're ready for the cutover, if you need to perform a fallback configuration, Replication Server can be used for that. And Live Compare also can be used to compare the data that you moved to Oracle from Postgres. All right, at this point, I'm ready to do a quick demo. I want to just open up if there's maybe another question we could take at this point before jumping into the demo. Maybe I can do that now.
Sure. Next question I have in line is, which is the best method for migrating Oracle database size of 10 TB?
Yeah, I think, that's, some of it will depend on, I'm guessing that you wouldn't have, with 10 TB, you would need to do that over time. So it's probably some sort of change data capture mechanism for that. I would say that that's the sort of thing where we would bring our experts in and their experience, and they may use a combination of different techniques for that sort of thing. It's kind of hard to answer that question without sort of looking at what your overall needs are as far as downtime goes, and sort of what is, like, some of your data may be historical in nature, maybe some of that could be moved in a different way. I think that sort of depends. We start to talk about sizes like that. That's where you want to have an expert look at that. And but there's a set of tools there and different techniques that we've used along the way. I would say that's probably a good thing to reach out to a professional services team and help them kind of help with that if that's something you need to do. All right, let me move on to a demo. I'm going to stop sharing my screen momentarily and bring up my desktop here in this bit. In the interest of time, I may skip this first one. Just know that there are Oracle constructs within the content of this database, like hierarchical queries, like the pragmatic autonomous transaction statement, like SQL Oracle-style outer joins. They're all going to be part of the database that I'm going to migrate, which is an extended version of the HR sample schema, which we've extended to include some of these other things that's in that database. Normally, I would review those in SQL Developer, but I feel like maybe I'm pushing it with time here if I do that. I'm just going to jump to the migration portal. Then I'll move data using Migration Toolkit, and then I'll use Live Compare to do a comparison of the data. And depending on time, maybe we'll just see it in PAM, or I'm sorry, in pgadmin. But that's sort of the goal of what I want to show you here. So give me a second, and I will stop sharing, and then I'll come back online with my full screen here in just a second. All right. So Crystal, maybe just give me a check. Can you see the migration portal?
Yes, looks good. Oh, looks like we're losing your video a little bit there, Matt. Bear with us, everyone. Sometimes the demo can affect some of the video quality and the connection via Zoom. I just shot Matt a quick update. Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, it said my internet just blinked out there for a minute. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes, yep, and it looks like we can hear you too.
Okay, very good. Well, let's hope that I don't have any more hiccups along the way. So this is the migration portal. It is available on our website. It's migrationenterprisedb.com is how you get to it. It does require a EDB website password, but with that that user account and password, you can log in and you can use it yourself. It's simply, I'm going to create a new project. And it uses you need to have basically the data definition language or the SQL file that defines the tables and such. You need to extract that from the Oracle database. I already did that. We have a tool called the Ddl Extractor. I use that. I'm just going to go ahead and choose the file that I'd already generated for that purpose. And set some options here. I could describe this project if I like, and we'll just call it demo project. And then we'll just hit create and assess. So at this point, it's uploading that information into the database. It's analyzing it. This particular one, when we first created it, interestingly enough, it was in the version 13 days, and it had a few more incompatibilities in it. So right now we're 98% compatible with this. But with version 14, since with every new version of Advanced Server, we introduced new compatibility features, we've actually cleaned up some of those. So it's made my demo a little bit quicker here than I had in the past. Anyways, you can see the list of different object types in the system. I have one view that failed, but the sort of metrics that it's presenting is that you see the object that failed, the count of those, how many were repaired by the system. So we also, since there's certain Oracle constructs and syntax that isn't compatible with Postgres, and they're fairly easy to translate, we do that translation for you. And then there's a number of other object types that were they passed as is without any issue. But let's look at this view. So you see the list of views. This plan commission view has what says here that the function map doesn't, the argument types aren't valid. We have a knowledge base so that we could see if that exists in there. And this round function actually. So you'll see the issue is that this is got a non-integer value, and this needs to be an integer. So the option is either to cast it as an integer or just to, I guess we could have done this as well. Just create this an integer value there. And then I can reassess at this point. So now I've converted that object to something that is Postgres equivalent, and it should work. And you'll see that this thing is now 100% compatible. Not every schema is going to be 100%. What we see on average is in the 90%, 85 to 95%. Most schemas will come in and be, somewhat compatible of that nature. There are a fair number that come over that are much higher than that, 98 to 100%. And then you will have some that are just going to be more challenging. But what we've seen is that with the combination of Oracle compatibility, Migration Portal's ability to do some of that automatic conversion for you, as well as giving you the tools to edit in place, we're able to get you to where you can convert your schema over. For the more challenging ones, that's where we recommend reaching out to experts like us, and we can help you do that sort of thing. At this point, we're ready to actually migrate this to a database. You have the option of migrating to on-premise, so many of you are doing that. That's either an existing on-premise database or a new one. If that case, what we would do is you could download the DDL from Migration Portal, and then you apply that yourself. The other option is just to use, say, one of our cloud databases, Big Animal. I'm going to do that for this demo. So I have my database that I actually had set up in Big Animal. I have my Big Animal interface here, and I need to get the host name from that. Give it some connection information. And then just to test that connection. So it said the connection was successful. And at this point, I'm going to hit next, and that'll apply that those changes to the database. And it says migration was successful. You can review a summary of that if you like. And maybe that's just worth doing real quick. And you can see that it migrated all these things, sequences, tables, constraints, and all of them were successful. And it gives you a little bit of information about the migration itself. So at this point, what we've done is move the structure, and we've also moved the code objects, the triggers, the functions, the procedures. All those have been moved over. We haven't moved the data yet. That's where I'm going to flip to command line interface at that point. And let's run Migration Toolkit. There we go. So it's a command, basically, I'm going to move the data only, and I'm going to defer loading indexes and constraints to that option as well. So it moved 8 tables, and all the data was moved over. Let's compare that using live compare. So I run this live compare utility. And what it's going to do is compare the results that, what was in Oracle and the results in Postgres. And I'll just take a minute or so here to finish up. All right, and then it does produce some summary reports. And you can see that it had 25 rows in this first table, and the number of rows in each table, number that processed, and it found no differences. So we can, at this point, be confident that the data was moved successfully. At this point, we could also look at this database in a tool like pgadmin. And we see not seeing why. All right. There we go. There's my HR schema. And I have the tables. I can actually look at the data in there. So you can see the data has been moved. I also can see, inspect the code there, the packages. You have this employee actions package. You have the functions in there. So you can use pgadmin or PEM to actually review the contents of your database and then work with the database itself. So that rounds out my demo. I'm going to return back to the presentation. Just a few more slides, and hopefully have time for some more questions and answers. All right, Crystal, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I just want to talk a little bit about our professional services, why you might want to use us to help you with migrations. first and foremost, some migrations are just going to be more complex than others. We do have, I would say, about what we see is half migrations are often done by organizations themselves using our tools. I would say that there's another set, especially as you're trying to do it at scale, and as you might have more complex kind of situations. That's where you would want to bring in our professional services to help you with that. We do have over 15 years of experience in working with migrations, so they can certainly help you out. Another reasons are you just may not have the resources in hand to do that, or you may not have the Postgres expertise, and that's important. You might have the Oracle expertise, but you don't have the equivalent Postgres expertise, and we can help you get that. We can also help you as part of that migration to sort of do that translation for you. And then if you're trying to do a migration at scale, say hundreds and maybe even 1,000 applications, you need some help in assessing and prioritizing and planning. And that's where our professional service will really be useful. And then after you've done a migration, you need to think about what you're going to need for that environment. And in general, the needs will be similar. You're going to need tools to help you with monitoring and managing your operational database, backing up and recovery, high availability, security and auditing, reporting. All those things are things that you're going to need in your system. And EDB has the tools for that. And we're going to look at a slide that just sort of gives a survey of those tools and what they look like, or what they are. Also, you're going to need to be keeping up on your database patches as well as major upgrades. Postgres is released as a new major version every year. Every major version is supported up to 5 years. Every major version will have a minor version update produced on about a quarterly basis every year, at least on a quarterly basis. At a minimum, you need to be keeping up with your minor version updates because that's going to give you the most stable version. It'll also be where your security fixes are introduced and any other sort of bug fixes. If you keep your database long enough, after 5 years, you want to make sure that you're upgrading to a new major version so that you have a supported version that actually is getting patches applied to it. That is just something that you need to think about probably in advance of the 5-year period. You want to be thinking about that a year or two out, like when do I need to do my next major version upgrade? And then obviously, what you'll need for your operational environment is that you'll need trained administrators and users. And again, EDB has offers great training for Postgres. We actually offer certification for Postgres as well. Quickly, this is a table just shows like some major features that you need for your operational environment. Oracle offers certain tools for those sorts of things. We don't offer the same tools, but we offer tools that sort of address those needs. So in the areas of monitoring and management, backup and recovery, high availability, replication, cross-data comparison, auditing, and geospatial. You've seen some of those in action just in our demo today. And then there is a little bit difference between our on-premise deployments and our big animals. So as you start to think about managed service, some of those things are just going to be offered natively within the managed service itself, as well as special configurations of, say, our Postgres distributed, which is coming later. But in general, our tools will work on both on-premise and in big animal. Some of the tools for high availability will just be sort of baked into the cloud offering itself. And then finally, I just want to wrap it up with some thoughts about best practices. I'll leave this in the presentation. I'll say, let me see if there's another question I can take. I see that we only have about a minute left, so maybe Crystal, I'll leave this on screen and actually I'm going to move to the next screen and offer also that this information is available to you. There's a migration handbook. You can use the migration portal, and please reach out to EDB if you want to talk about migrations anymore. And then Crystal, if you have any last question, I'll take it right now.
Sure, maybe we can kind of end it off with how do we support the concurrent updates on Oracle and EDB during migration?
Right, so that's a tool like Replication Server. So you can be making updates to Oracle, and those will be fed to your Postgres system. And then whenever you're ready to go back the other way, whenever you're starting to accept writes in the Oracle Postgres database, then you can have that fallback position through Replication Server for doing that. If you have some more complex need where you need to sort of be doing writes in both, that's something that we can talk to you about. It's a little bit more tricky configuration to set up, but we have customers that have done that sort of thing. And that's probably all the time we have for questions.
Yes, thank you, Matt. We are at the top of the hour. As mentioned, there was a bit of content to get through, and hopefully it was valuable for all of you. And again, you'll receive the slides and the recording as soon as we're able to share that with you. So you'll be able to access the content that we reviewed and some additional information and resources as well. And of course, we encourage you to reach out to our team and connect with us as needed. So thank you again to you, Matt, and of course to all of our attendees for joining. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Crystal. Bye.
Bye.